Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Greg, we got a special show here today. You ready to go?
I am. This is an exciting topic, first of all, and it's a long time coming, this sort of change in this industry. So I'm not going to give away too much because I don't know what the rest of the script reads, Scott. So,
well, today's show, we're speaking with a founder and supply chain technology entrepreneur that's on the move, right? Doing big things, especially in the warehousing, distribution, and fulfillment space. So stay tuned for what should be a great conversation, tackling some really important things, I'd say, here in the e-commerce age. So looking forward to that, Greg. So with no further ado, you already heard from him, at least a word or two. Should we introduce our guest, Greg?
Now,
okay,
let's do it.
The timing is so critical here.
It's critical, and we're very precise. Right. We are very precise.
Impeccable. Okay, so let's welcome in today's guest. Today's guest cut his teeth on learning the foundations of systems and operations at Accenture, where he was also introduced to warehousing technology. From there, via a cold stint in Minnesota, we may hear about, he found his way to Austin, Texas with Redworks, what some call the driver behind the modern WS software platform. Our guest led that company through growth, acquisition, and successful onboarding by Dematic, and then gained inspiration to start a whole new company, which has really been taken off here in recent months. We're going to learn a lot more about that. So let's bring in Alex Ramirez, co-founder and CEO with CognitOps. Alex, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning, Scott and Greg. It's great to be with you.
And it is indeed morning where you are, right?
Yes, it is out here on the West Coast. Yeah, I love how time zones work. So luckily, I'm an early riser, gentlemen. So,
well, we thoroughly enjoyed the pre-show conversation. We kind of tackled the gambit from Disney to sports to some of the boots you wear, and name it. I really enjoyed it. But Greg, let's start with just getting to know Alex a little better. So, Alex, for starters, where'd you grow up, and give us some anecdotes about your upbringing?
Yeah, so I grew up in Miami, Florida, the 305, pretty much born and raised. My parents are immigrants from Nicaragua. They came to the States in the late 70s during the kind of communist takeover and the Contra War. I've got stories for days around my family being involved in the Contra part of the war, assassination attempts for presidents, meeting Ollie North, HW, meetings in the White House, crazy stories about my family being involved in revolution. And so I feel a little bit like a revolutionary in this space, hopefully not as, violent, of course. And so you
never know what's required though, Alex. I mean, this is supply chain. DCs are kind of, rugged, rigid environments. It may take a wrecking ball to change them. And so I grew up, went to an all-boy private Jesuit school, whose I think most famous alum is Fidel Castro. So again, this kind of revolutionary type theme. And one of my favorite stories to tell that kind of will give you a sense of who I am as a CEO and leader is all throughout college, I coached Little League baseball. And I would grab the bad news bears. I was a pretty good athlete. I was on travel teams, but I always loved my right fielders. They were the best players, the best attitudes. No prima donnas. So when I started to coach, I just grabbed a whole bunch of right fielders. I'm like, I'm going to repurpose you, and I'm going to coach you up. And for 4 years, we won the championship. In fact, in one of those years, I won a radio contest for $10,000. And what did I do? I bought, the team uniforms and myself a Gateway computer. Remember those like Cal box? Gateway, computers? Yes.
Yeah, wow. Gateway computers, blast from the past. So those are the two things. I wanted to be a nerd and I wanted to be a coach. And so I just loved coaching all the way back when I was in college. So yeah, son of immigrants, went to the U, was a math major, wasn't a very good one. And hopefully, made a good choice here going into Accenture, and we'll see where this vector takes me in my career.
All right. So there's so much you've shared.
Yeah.
We could build hours upon hours of podcasting around. Let's go back. so your parents, immigrants from Nicaragua, was
That's
entrepreneurialism, was that when they heard that's kind of what you want to do, how did they respond? Did they get that and really get behind it?
They loved it. So from one side of my family, we've got entrepreneurs, and there's a business in Naples, Florida, a plant nursery that's very successful. On the other side, it's been more of an inspiration to actually start CognitOps from the experience my dad has, who's my superhero, middle class, providing for his family, coming from, poor background. And he had so many ideas, fantastic ideas, but never really launched them because he didn't want to really threaten this middle class livelihood that he was providing for all of us. And so I think back to that, every day of him coming with ideas, or a little frustrated that he wasn't taking that leap. And that was the main driver for me to take the leap and be so terrified about putting it all on black. But certainly, yes, entrepreneurship is in the DNA, but so is fear of not doing things. And so those two conflicting forces I had to reconcile when I started the business.
All right. So one more question, then I'm going to pass the baton to Greg, and we're going to talk about your professional journey. So being a devout addict to coaching, right? I love that give back, right? There's so many kids that benefit from going through baseball leagues and whatnot. Are you also, from a business standpoint, are you a big believer in coaching people up as well? Is there do you see a lot of parallels there?
Oh, absolutely. So we've got one-on-ones with all of our leadership teams and leaders to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. I suffer from the imposter syndrome. And so I have that empathy of a lot of the pains that I have, I know other leaders are having as well. So breaking that ice to say, gosh, when someone asks you, how can I help? It's often hard to say, well, these are the things I need help on. Instead, I kind of broach it with, I suffer these things, right? I've had moments of being at the trough of despair, or feeling like an imposter, or not feeling adequate at a certain job. Tell me about an experience where, you've felt that. And so that kind of opens people up to being coached. Because if you just, get right at them and say, hey, I'm going to coach you, it's kind of tough, right? They're not going to be willing, co-parties in the coaching.
Greg,
man, that is some seriously deep thinking about leadership. I mean, I guess we should expect that, Scott. I mean, when you think about being on both sides of leadership and turmoil, and having seen your parents, especially having seen dictatorship, having gone to school with or where a dictator went to school, all of those.
That's right.
And yet you've turned out to be kind of a giving and open leader, it sounds like to me. I mean, to be that open, to share your, to share your concerns of yourself with other leaders has got to be really, really comforting for your team. So,
yeah, I hope so.
That's powerful stuff. It's funny. It's funny how many people there are. People think of Cuba as having a lot of residents in Miami. But the family that owns Watsco, which is a big air heating and air conditioning distributor in the Grove, they're Nicaraguan immigrants as well. So originally from Syria, had to leave Syria because of religion, went to Nicaragua, and then emigrated to the States. So a lot of those stories, and I can really empathize with families coming from Latin America to the States. So that's very cool.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your professional. Oh, no, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, no, sorry. I wanted to interject something quickly. Like so one of our core values is grit, and it was one that I voted for. And I think it's something that immigrants, especially those that come from, war-torn countries like Cuba and Nicaragua, I was destined to be grit. And for me, that's code word for just being stubborn, guys. Like, I'm just really stubborn, like failure is not an option type sentiment. And so I see those types of stories, and it's inspiring to understand, like, if you've got a tight grip, you can do a lot of really magical things.
Well, you're in the right part of the country for grinding it out with grit. Nothing is appreciated more in Texas than true grit, right? So,
that's right. Indeed.
I was born in the Midwest too, and I I really get that. I mean, people are used to just kind of grinding it out. So it's a really interesting culture, and it fits really well, I think, with where you've come from.
It does.
So you actually had jobs before CognitOps, right? Accenture
I did.
And more. So tell us a little bit about what you took from those roles. Any kind of professional learnings from your roles, or any eureka moments in your business maturation, or anything like that?
Yeah, I want to go back to Scott's opening around the frigid time in Minneapolis. So another just round of stories, maybe over a beer or five, is my time in Minneapolis, and my first walk in January outside of the Skyway. I look outside the hotel, and it's a beautiful day. And of course, I'm an ignorant South Floridian kid that's never seen snow before. And, I used my signing bonus to Anderson, now Accenture, on a leather jacket from Wilson's Leather. I'm thinking, I'm great. Enough. I'm the bee's knees here. That's enough, right? So I come out of the Hilton, I turn right on Nicollet Mall to walk down to my building, and I feel a pain like I have never felt before in my life. And so, of course, my not smart person decides to start running. Makes it worse. And so I shoot into the wind chill. And so I shoot into the USB Bank building, and there's the thermometer that says 20 below. And I'm like, I was a math major, not a chemistry major. Is that physically impossible? Like, can that happen? So anyway, so one of the earliest lessons I've ever learned in my career, that I have certainly adopted because I lived in Minneapolis for a good 7 years, is wear a coat and be prepared. Don't be an idiot. So anyway, that was the first one. I think
Gosh, that is the be prepared thing is, it's so appropriate. And you learn it in the hardest way in Minneapolis. Yeah. One of my first gigs, I'll keep this short, but one of my first gigs was when I first got into technology, was my assignment was to go to the IBM center, one of the IBM centers in Minneapolis, and do some training on the technology that we were working on. My feet I just wore regular shoes, dress shoes. My feet got so cold walking into the building that my shoes almost fell off because my feet contracted. It was that cold.
Yes.
And I'm not
clown shoes.
Yeah, it was not as foreign to me as it even was to you, but boy, did I learn from that. And cold will teach you preparation like nothing else will.
Yes. Yeah, my experience at Accenture, beyond the frigidness, was, I think, a blessing for me, because it also taught me the power of impact in an organization. This is the year 2000, and the economy's crashing, e-commerce, is crashing, and here I am building a warehouse management system for Walmart.com. Their Carrollton, Georgia facility off a platform called Retech, and it was their office in Minneapolis. And it was all Oracle Forms and a little bit of Java and Unix shell scripting. And I couldn't spell Java if you gave me every letter but the A. And yet there I am, billing at 180 an hour, expected to deliver all these mods and specifications. And so the getting to learn something quickly and being afraid that there is somebody behind you, that if you don't take that opportunity to deliver impact, guess what? You're expendable. And I saw so many of my colleagues and teammates being walked out in our kind of pod, that it instilled a healthy sense of fear, and that professional fear of, there's always somebody willing to work harder than you. So work hard. Started at Accenture, and I thank them for it. It was a terrifying moment in my career. 21-year-old in the cold, learning something that he's never learned before, trying to deliver features to this monolith of a business with pressure. Talk about a cauldron, right? And a rite of passage.
I've heard. I've never had the guts, frankly, to do the consulting thing, and you have to be a pretty special talent. I didn't go to the right school, and I didn't get good enough grades at the wrong school. So I had zero chance of ever being an Accenture consultant. But I've met them before, and they are a special breed. A lot of those of you who have been able to be consultants to work at that level are really special talents. It's amazing to hear that story of those people, because you sort of think of them as the cream of the crop. I mean, especially in those days, they certainly were. So that's a brutal environment. So from Accenture, tell us where you went from that point.
Yeah, so from Accenture, I went to High Jump Software, which is now part of Kerber Supply Chain. At the time, smaller company, hadn't been acquired by 3M and then divested by 3M yet. Doing some interesting things. One of my first projects was to help build a warehouse management system for Circuit City. A blast from that past.
Hey,
and so I've got the Midas touch. So and so we built.
High Jump wasn't High Jump. Were they based in Minneapolis?
They were based in Minneapolis. So I
where Best Buy is.
Where Best Buy is, yeah.
But you got the Circuit City project.
Right. You deal with the cards you're dealt, So and so I was traveling at Accenture from Miami to Minneapolis. There were days where I would go from 30 below to 100 degrees in Miami, and so crazy commutes there. But went over to High Jump and loved the team there. Chris Heim was the CEO and an inspirational leader. And we were just doing some really, really good warehouse management systems for, strong brands. Some survived, some didn't, of course. But at that time, 2 years into building WMSs, it just made sense to me. When I was in college, I wanted to be an actuary. I was never smart enough. I went to the Harvard of Coral Gables, right? I don't know if that, that's what they call the University of Miami, right? So,
but hang on a second, Alex. I can't say that I've ever met anyone that had the dream of becoming an actuary going to college. That's highfalutin stuff.
Yeah, no, I love math, and my backup plan, Scott, to come out of college in the event that I was a complete loser and couldn't find anything, was to be a math teacher. I saw so many people hate math growing up because of bad teachers that I'm like, I've got to fix that. Like, just math is awesome. And I can teach it same way I could coach Little League. But of course, capitalism struck, and here I am. And so at High Jump, just building warehouse management systems, it made sense. Stuff comes into the warehouse, something happens to it, out it goes. And so that just kind of set me on my career, right? 2 years in, working at High Jump for a good 7 years, in a multitude of different roles. Another kind of experience that I've had that allows me to go back to the kind of that leadership coaching is faking it till you make it. It's arguable whether it's a good philosophy, a bad philosophy. You should be prepared. I think there's much to be said about those individuals that are willing to raise their hand and say, I know I'm ill prepared, but there's no one else volunteering for this really tough job, and it's got to get done. Right. And that's been that was High Jump for me, right? Signing up for projects or doing things that I wasn't prepared to do, but gosh darn it, I was going to be gritty enough to figure it out, right? And so I love that about my experience at High Jump. Sometimes
being a leader is just being willing to step up and lead, not even able.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. Not even able.
It's just being willing, right? I think that's a powerful lesson for people is if you wait until you're ready to lead, it's going to be too late. You may never be ready.
Yep.
You've got to just do it, and what is it? It's the Peter principle, right? You're elevated to your level of incompetence. And that's how you gain competence you have to, as I have said often, baby birds don't fly because they grow wings. They fly because mom pushes them out of the nest. Right. And ascending to leadership or any additional level of knowledge is almost exactly like that. You've just got to go for it. And sometimes you win and sometimes you fall to the ground and a nice guy comes out and puts you back in the nest.
That's right.
Hopefully.
That's right.
So, So tell us a little bit about, I didn't realize you had been in WMS kind of your whole career. So two things. One, tell us how you got from the U into WMS. I mean, obviously, was it just coincidence at Accenture that you wound up on a WMS project?
Yeah, absolute coincidence, divine providence. The partner in the Miami office
volunteered me to go do this project in Minneapolis. And Retech at the time was more of a point of sale and merchandising system.
Yeah.
And they had this offshoot product for warehouse management that Walmart just happened to buy, and they needed an additional engineer. And there I was, I'm just kind of standing in line, and they're like, you're going to go, code this thing. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Right. So yeah, just pure divine providence.
Wow. That's incredible. So I have to ask you this. Sorry, this is a little bit off track, but I have to ask you this.
Go for it.
So many people say to be successful, you have to do what you love or love what you do. I sense that because you were sort of thrust into WMS. You didn't select it because you loved it. Did you learn to love it?
Yes. Yeah, it's that I love that discussion, right? Of do what you love versus, love what you do. I'm more of the latter, in that I know I've grown into my skin. I still am growing into my skin as a CEO and as a leader, right? I think our jobs, number one, are always to learn and mature and to be better. But what I found in Accenture was the ability to work around really smart people, right? At High Jump, I found, again, another opportunity to work with really smart people. That's what I think I've been able to really love, is whatever it is that I do. If I'm working with people that will inspire me, I will grow to love whatever I'm being inspired about.
Yeah.
And so Accenture with warehouse management, High Jump with warehouse management, Redworks with warehouse execution, I've been fortunate to work with exceptional people that, could I have been in advertising and gone to fancy headquarters versus, Rialto, California, where there's a warehouse? Sure. Would I have loved it? Probably, if I would have been around those really brilliant people. And so I think that there's kind of a Venn diagram of those two arguments where, if you find someone that inspires you, then take the inspiration, right? You will, it's a reason why you're there. There is a reason why you're being inspired. So go explore it. Right. And for me, it's just pure luck. Right. And then being around really smart people have led me to love this industry.
Learn to love what you do. There is a lot of power in that. I mean, you don't have to do what you love. By the way, it can be a little bit dangerous to do what you love. I have a friend who is a professional golfer, a teaching pro. And
yes,
the lesson he taught me was never make your vacation your vocation. Because whenever he was, when the weather was beautiful out, as he used to say, I'm quoting him here, when the weather was beautiful out, you guys are out playing golf. I'm teaching fat, bald guys how to hit a golf ball. Right.
Yes. Yeah, no, right on. I think that, like a good example is I'm a watch nerd. And so I will spend whatever time I have, looking at Hodinkee and other websites on watches and researching them. I would be a bad horologist. I love looking at them, but I don't have the patience to understand all the movements and but I love the science and the engineering behind it. Right. I would be bankrupt if I tried to go sell watches or, be a watch retailer. Right. And so I think learn to love what you do, because you surround yourself with brilliant people, I think has been luckily my approach, and it's worked, because I would be miserable at, doing what you love, because I love watches and I'm bad at them.
Well, also it takes the fun out of something that is somewhat of an escape from the day-to-day as well. Right.
It does.
So,
yep.
All right. Yep. So let's take the leap. Obviously, maybe we should call it jump. Let's take the jump. Let's talk about CognitOps, because I think you were sort of, as you said, divine intervention. You were sort of externally presented with this opportunity. I think you've turned it into something that is changing the way that warehouse management works. So tell us a little bit about CognitOps and what you do. Tell us a little bit how that is evolving or innovating or disrupting warehouse management.
Yeah, so the origin of CognitOps dates back to when I was introduced to RedWorks back in 2009, warehouse execution software company. At the time, I didn't really know what it was. It was more pick-to-light than warehouse execution. But the company evolved, and as Scott mentioned, was CEO. We successfully exited the business to Dematic. And then started to incorporate the business into Dematic. So I've seen warehouse management, I've seen warehouse execution, I've seen automation, implemented some really fancy systems. And that all of that experience led to the origin of CognitOps. So the beginning of 2018, after 2 years of being in Dematic and wonderful company that was doing great things with RedWorks, I'm not a big company guy. And so, it was time for me to go. A good leader knows when he starts to smell like fish, and I started to smell a little bit. And so I left and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was going to, contemplate the navel and take a sabbatical. And it was about a Saturday and Sunday before I started getting real bored with myself. And there was an accelerator here in Austin, Texas, that was having a pitch competition. I just wanted to sit in and see what pitches looked like in the VC space. And Greg, you'd appreciate this. I mean, these founders were flailing. It was pretty sad, and investors were just being mean and brutal to these poor kids. Silicon Valley nerds that wanted to come in and disrupt some space, right, and didn't really have the calluses on their hands and the gnashed teeth to really empathize with the space that they're trying to disrupt. And fortuitously, my co-founder, Reese Mackin, was at the same event. And we kind of look across the room and we're like, why don't we try this? Like, our parents tell us we're really smart, right? The warehouse still has so much blue ocean, right, to conquer. Yeah. Let's go explore this thing. And so that's what we did. I think that was on a Friday. The following Monday, I buy a whiteboard from Office Depot, plop it up against a wall in my kids' playroom, and we start just playing a real fancy game of Pictionary. We're like, why do warehouses stink? And so it's like taking a first principle approach to trying to distill down the answer. And what it led to was a pain that we felt often in our QBRs and post-peak assessments with our customers, which was, great, you gave me an awesome tool, and I'm still experiencing the same angst. Why is that? And so that kind of led to this conversation of CognitOps.
That's fantastic. That's a great story, and a common one, by the way, for these pitch competitions. It seems to me that they go one of two directions. They are nothing but affirmations and pats on the head with no result, or they are a brutal deconstruction of your entire personhood, right? Leaving you a liquid mess on the floor.
Indeed. Indeed. I've never seen more sweat from a non-gym environment than that pitch competition is pretty awkward. So, but I think coming from that, because we experienced firsthand this pain, I often introduce myself as an arsonist putting out my own fire. Right? There's all the WMS.
Would really appreciate that.
Yeah, and so I know what this feels like. I've been in warehouses. I'm actually here in California visiting clients, right? Helping them use the product to drive resiliency and just better operations. And being in the front lines with these leaders struggling to use their modern tools that I trust we'll get into, you get to really empathize with the pain. And we talk about empathy a lot in CognitOps because we never want to be, there can never be daylight between what we build, what we dream of, and customer value, right? And it's hard to not, to do that if you don't really love the pain that the customer is feeling and experience it yourself, right? And so I always admire those founders that can go into a space not knowing a darn thing about it, create a new product and go create a new market. I'm not that type of entrepreneur, right? I know this pain, so let me go solve it.
So what is the biggest pain that you guys are solving right now? I'm curious because there are so many pains in a warehouse, a distribution, or an e-commerce, particularly with e-commerce taking the fore. There are a lot of pains in warehouses these days. So what is it that you guys are doing that answers the question that you were talking about? Okay, you gave us this great system. We still have all these pains. What can you do for us? So tell us a little bit about that.
So there's multitude of pain points that warehouses suffer, and it's why there's multi-billion-dollar markets across robot software, et cetera. But the easiest one to really understand is if you look at pick any Fortune 500 company, go to their career site, look up in some derivative form of operations management or warehouse management or warehouse manager, you're going to find the most incongruous requirements back to back, right? One's going to say something like, quantitative and qualitative assessment of real-time performance of the warehouse. And you're reading that and you're like, that sounds like linear algebra. And then right after that, it's going to say proficiency with Microsoft Excel. And so no one's really understood that those two are literally impossible to perform at the same time. They're not even parallel universes, right? And so yet the groupthink in operating a warehouse across industries, vertical markets, planets has been, I need a human being to perform this impossible mission to create balance and flow. And so that was kind of the proxy where Reese and I said, I think we have something here if we can automate a lot of those kind of decisions that these leaders make. And an easy one to understand is if I have many systems in my warehouse, or even one, we've got clients that only have one WMS. Where do I position my people? Not labor management. Labor management is important. It's a scoreboard. You understand rates and kind of like, hey, somebody's working at 80%, great. But if it's the Tuesday after the Atlanta Falcons win the Super Bowl, Scott, whenever that happens, right? And
2077.
2077. Yeah. So, if it's the Tuesday after the Super Bowl and everybody in the Atlanta warehouse is coming in because they drank a little bit too much Budweiser and they're at 80% efficiency, great. Labor management system is going to tell you that you're at 80%. What do you do about it?
Right.
And so that question of, with the people I have and the performance that they're actually executing, how do I best position my people across all the areas to be as successful as possible? That's the easiest pain point that CognitOps solves. And the biggest challenge that a lot of these operators have when they try to use Excel to perform that linear algebra, right?
Or visibility, right? I think what you're speaking to is how often visibility, how often analytics, reporting, whatever it is, how often it just presents the data and then leaves the human to their own devices. When the data exists and logic can be, or knowledge can be applied to actually give them the answer, or at least a range of recommendations. And I think that's the critical gap, right? And it absolutely should have been done, decades ago, frankly.
Decades ago.
But now it's absolutely demanded by people coming into the workplace these days. Technology should do technology things. If the data exists to solve the problem, solve the fucking problem. And if it doesn't, then you allow people whose gift is to take insufficient data in a rapid environment and make a sound decision. Then you present it to them that way. Right?
Yes. The vision that we have, so our vision statement is to unleash ingenuity to give rise to resilient businesses. And that unleashing ingenuity is something that these operators just don't have in the warehouse, right? So if we believe in AI for good, and the operations manager, there was a survey, I think by Gallup a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, that said only 22% of warehouse employees feel engaged. And so a simple life hack that we're giving to these leaders is by allowing us to make those recommendations, do those decisions, it frees up the headspace, the oxygen in the room, and their time to go do what coaches should be doing, right? Going back to my story about Little League, I think I was a good coach because I engaged one-on-one with every single one of my players. And when you can't do that as a leader because you're too busy fighting fires, playing the whack-a-mole game, running pivot tables in Excel, guess what? Your team members aren't engaged, right? And so that's our vision is let's go unleash ingenuity by giving people the oxygen to go just have that human touch, right? And let us do the minutia of linear algebra in the cloud because the data is there, to your point.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we have foreshadowed a variety of trends, right? That's the backdrop for what's given rise to CognitOps. And so I want to recap these three things, and whichever one that maybe the two of y'all even would want to kind of elaborate more on. Let's do that. Let's do it that way. So what's interesting, if y'all think back, we're all children of the 80s, right? We all can remember those blue commercials where one of the last phrases that was uttered in these infomercials was allow 6 to 8 weeks for delivery, right? How
holy mackerel, that seems like 100 years ago.
Doesn't it?
It does.
So there is naturally enormous pressure on distribution centers, fulfillment houses, you name it, right? So there's three things that in our pre-show conversation we kind of talked about that you and Greg just kind of touched on. One, of course, the landscape around distribution centers and the pressure there, right? Fulfillment, you name it, warehousing, micro warehousing, so many different fun things to talk about. Number two, you both mentioned resiliency, but as we all know, it can't be just part of your talking points. We've got to have global supply chain has to have real resiliency, right?
Yeah.
For all the curveballs. And then third, that y'all both spoke about is these tools that organizations and, let's face it, practitioners and certainly leaders are clinging to, right? Like there's that scene in what's the second Star Wars movie? The Empire Strikes Back.
It's not.
Luke Skywalker is clinging to that thing before he drops down from Sky City, right? That is a perfect illustration of how organizations are clinging to what worked really well, say 20, even 25, 30 years ago, and they're still making that work somehow now at the cost of truly optimizing the operation. So those are three different things that you and Greg were just speaking to. What else deserves a deeper dive out of those three?
Yeah, so I think the three are a good summary. There's one though that I think we have seen that Greg alluded to, which is visibility. Right now, you see a growth of visibility tools. There's Project 44 and FourKites and many others that are providing really awesome functionality across the supply chain. It's hard often to have people understand the value of visibility, right? And these businesses are growing because people are starved for it. But I think oftentimes I go into opportunities, Scott, and we talk about just raw visibility into the warehouse. And people will say, well, I have analytics. I have charts and I have graphs and, I have Tableau and Power BI and a whole bunch of industrial engineers. And so the one of the challenges that we face in the industry is having people understand the power of visibility, especially in the kind of microcosmic representation of the supply chain known as the warehouse, right? And so that's something that we see a growing trend, or it's starting to erode this kind of stubbornness behind accepting the value of visibility in the warehouse. And would love, Greg, your thoughts on, how visibility as just kind of a construct has evolved in supply chain for people to just say, look, I need it. I don't need to justify it through the same lens of 80s, 90s, 2000 purchases, which is how many people are you going to reduce? Well, that's a broken model, right? Like there is a value in visibility. And so we're starting to see some acceleration in just people understanding that through visibility comes comprehension, and through comprehension comes resiliency.
Yeah, I think, and I love Alex's style, Scott. You give him three choices, and like me, he picks a fourth.
Yeah,
A, B, C, or
right.
D.
So I think we were separated at birth. But I think all of this goes to those points that you made, micro fulfillment and e-commerce fulfillment. The transition in the distribution center is so critical. And I think analytics is, I can say it because I can take a neutral position. I think analytics is the new age BI, visibility is the new age analytics, which was the new age BI, which was the new age reporting. I think that the gap that continues to leave in terms of helping people make the decision, not just presenting them with the facts, but helping them utilize those facts and make that decision. I think that bridge is critical because the transition in distribution, the transition in e-commerce fulfillment, the transition in micro fulfillment, and the multiple ways you can fulfill goods is so disruptive. At the same time that it's advancing the industry, it is disrupting the status quo so dramatically that you have to have some assistance in moving forward and making those decisions. And I will continue to go back to this. If the technology can at least recommend what the decision ought to be based on what it knows, it ought to do that.
Bingo.
Every single time.
And so I didn't want to sandbag you a little bit there, Scott, but it segueing back to your 3 points, I think with visibility is kind of like this blanket over those three vectors. Now, if I'm a supply chain leader and I have something that's giving me visibility, recommendations, now I can make confident decisions to say, if I do micro fulfillment, I'm going to anchor some steel to the ground, right? Or I'm going to have autonomous mobile robots. I'm going to have something that's capital intensive. I'm going to put, my hand on the wall, and I'm making this decision knowing that it's predicated on assumptions with sensitivity. The market is changing so fast, but I have to make a decision. And so when you do, and you create a box, but all of a sudden your customers are requiring a triangle, you're not going to blow the building up, right? And so that going back to that wrecking ball analogy earlier about, my life as an immigrant and revolutionary, the wrecking ball isn't to destroy the warehouse. It's to just change how you use it. And if you've got equipment and you're lacking labor and you need speed, well, then you need a brain that can take all this data to say, this is the best way to morph, right, your building according to the changing market. But it starts with, I have a problem because I can see it. Mm-hmm. And I have recommendations because I chose the right partner through, these types of systems, right?
Love it. All right. So much there, so much goodness already. But Greg, we're going to kind of shift gears a minute and talk about some really good news, right?
Yeah.
Kind of up your alley, right? You're the what should I say? The fundraising maven. You've done a lot of that. And just coined that nickname. You've done a lot of that in your journey. So some of Alex and the team's recent experiences are right up your alley, right?
Yeah. So you just raised, I'm looking right here. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, you raised $11 million in your A round, right? Your first sort of venture round of investment. So tell us a little bit about that. I'd love it if you could relay just real briefly how that changes your life, and how that changes your work day world.
Sure. Well, it just amplifies the level of terror that I feel every day, Greg, and not blowing it. Right. So that's
totally
all.
Get it.
That's the only thing that changed for me. I'm still a poor founder. And so we just raised First Mark Capital, led the round. Beth Ferreira is a general partner that's going to be sitting on our board, and former CEO at Etsy and Fab.com. And I think she's going to bring just a tremendous amount of perspective to the board that we need. And then Peter Chrisman from Chicago Ventures is going to be the other board member, and Peter has been just so creative and great to the board. What led us to the Series A is really kind of a tailwind of the pandemic, and I hate to say that because it's been disastrous for families and for first responders and just the economy in general. But it's shown that supply chains are important, right? Everybody wants their toilet paper, and you don't want people fighting in the aisles for paper towel. And so the word resiliency all of a sudden has popped up, and people are like, gosh, how do I adapt my building? to whatever the new normal is, and God forbid another blip right in the universe with another pandemic. And so I think a solution like ours, where we can come in a very low drag, lightweight implementation, can start to provide that, is starting to get steam. And supply chain is hot. We all know that, right? Supply chain tech and investment is hot. So I wish I can tell you it was all my charm, my wit, my personality that got us the $11 million. No, there are a lot of market forces.
They got you at least two, right, Alex? They got you at least two.
$2.00. Yes, absolutely, Scott. I'll take it. That's gas money back in college days. That'll get me, to the Burger King. And so the all those macros aside, I think what got us to this point is being staunch and gritty in our vision of creating a brain for the warehouse, having doubts, many doubts, and suffering through troughs of despair as an entrepreneur. When you start it, you struggle to gain a little bit of steam. You've only got one customer. The product doesn't work sometimes. There's just so many moments of angst. And I wish I can tell you that I lost my hair because of CognitOps, but that happened a long time ago. But I lost more of it because of it. And so
I think you did the right thing, by the way. You look very cool with a shaved head.
Thank you.
More people should go that direction.
And that's Greg White.
We're talking fashion here.
Yeah, that's Greg White.
No, I know you've got that luscious.
So
yeah, you've got that luscious head of hair, Greg.
If you're called cool by Greg White, that's like getting a championship belt. And
oh yeah. Touched by Elvis for sure. And so we surrounded ourselves with leaders and technologists that are just better than us, better humans, better professionals, better technologists. And we got out of their way to allow them to go execute on the vision of the business. And thankfully, we've been able to just go in the past 8 months, go from literally one client, one warehouse to 10 clients and many more warehouses. And so we're starting to get to that magical kind of inflection point, Greg, where now what I'm concerned about is the turbulence in the business, managing growth versus starving to death, right? I think we've crossed that chasm. And certainly how the $11 million is changing that is we just got to grow faster. We got to build more on this fantastic data set we're creating and create more value for our customers, for our team members, and certainly for our shareholders. And so it just means you got to go bigger, you got to go faster, but you have to operate prudently, right? Capital efficiently, and make sure that you don't, end up as another tombstone because somebody decided to, do something stupid, right?
I don't know you that well, Alex, but I know enough to know that seems unlikely. I mean,
no, from your lips to God's ears.
barring extreme market forces, which could always happen, right? That's always a risk in any business. I think what you're doing bridges a significant gap in the marketplace, and clearly your investors are highly sophisticated. And I think it's important for people to understand this money doesn't just fall out of the sky. There is a ton of it out there, but it is a rigorous process. And to make the investment in CognitOps, these investors listened to 100 pitches and picked yours. So there is a very strong and real sense of affirmation that founders should feel when they get this level of investment, because you've established a business model, you've established your go-to-market strategy, you have a philosophy, you are selling, and what you're struggling now to do, I presume, is to deliver effectively. That's really what you need the money for. That's when you get funding, is when you have established yourself and you need to ramp up rapidly to be able to deliver in the marketplace. So kudos to you, first of all.
Thank you
for getting here from there.
Yes.
And I think I think there's a lesson for anyone who's a founder in this, and that is investors invest in milestones. They don't invest in runway, right?
That's right.
$11 million will get us the next, it'll get us the next 18 months. I'm sure the discussion is more. $11 million gets us to this point of being able to fulfill demand, to this point of being able to create more demand, to this point of being able to expand the product and the team to improve both our technology and our ability to execute. So that's really what people invest in. I can see why they invested in you. So yeah, congratulations and great lesson for our community.
Yeah,
I love it.
Appreciate it.
Love that, Greg. A lot of good stuff there. And you've got both of y'all have your finger on the pulse, and I love learning from these conversations just like this here. So, and Alex, you are doing a bunch of hiring. I picked y'all's website earlier. So, folks, if the type of organization solving types of problems that and has the kind of type of culture Alex described here, be sure to check them out and maybe land with them and grow with them. So, a lot of good stuff. So, Alex, on that note, we have really run the gambit here today, and we're just scraping the tip of the iceberg. You bring a lot of passion and personality to the table on top of your expertise, and that's what makes really fun conversations here at Supply Chain Now. But how can other folks benefit and sit down and compare notes with you as well? What would you push people to?
The website is certainly a good resource, and you can contact us through the website. There's a form there, I think, in Contact Us Now. Certainly feel free to email me directly, alex@cognitops.com. I love to commiserate with ops managers, talk about the pains they feel in their warehouses, or with supply chain leaders on, what they're thinking about for supply chains of the future. And we could play, Wizard of Oz in those types of conversations. So you can go alex@cognitops.com or info@cognitops.com, or just visit us on our website, www.cognitops.com.
Speaking of the Wizard of Oz, we've got the Wizard of Wichita right here on this show.
And I'm even wearing my Wichita flag today. So
hey, we're big fans of Wichita here, and a big shout out to AA Mohib that hopefully is listening. Okay, so Alex, it's so neat. We had the good fortune of having a couple of pre-show conversations with you. What I really find intriguing about conversations like this is you don't put on any airs. You're the same leader that Greg and I were speaking to kind of casually in our first conversation and then the pre-show, and it spills over right here. You don't put on any airs. That's so important when you're having conversations like this and talking about the journey you're on. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And we'll have to have you back. We need to, every so often we do, Greg, Supply Chain Nerds Talk Sports. And it's been kind of tough to do one of those fun casual episodes lately with everything going on. However, you've got a passion for that. What they bring you on, we'll talk about the Marlins and hopefully
let's do it.
Hopefully them not doing too much harm to the Braves this year. We'll see. The Braves are doing plenty to themselves.
Right.
But
they need no help.
They need no help. But a pleasure to reconnect with you. And folks, you can check again, just to make sure y'all heard that URL, CognitOps.com, and we'll make sure we have Alex's information in the show notes. So Alex, huge thanks for joining us today and spending some time with us. Alex Ramirez, co-founder and CEO with CognitOps. So Greg, let's talk about Alex like he's not still with us. What is
I love this part. Yes.
Boy.
Before we sign off, what is one of your key takeaways from all the good stuff that Alex has shared here today?
Gosh, it's hard to pick one, but the term grit comes immediately to mind. When you're founding a company, when you're growing a company, when you get to that certain stage, you have all of the things that Alex has talked about: imposter syndrome, that constant daily fear of failure. Right? As a guy that I worked with I would argue, not a startup, already a $20 million technology company when I joined them, he said, "I'm afraid of losing my job every day. That's what motivates me." Yeah. And grit is a lot of, as we talked about, it's just figuring out how to get things done, whether you feel like you're competent, you deserve to, you are the right person to or not, you just step up and you do it. And I got to tell you, that is a spirit that we can use worldwide, but certainly in the States, that it's okay to try, it's okay to fail, it's okay to feel inadequate, but still do something.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's so critical, and clearly misplaced feeling of inadequacy, right? But not uncommon. This whole imposter syndrome is actually scientific. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who are eminently competent often feel much, much less competent than they are. And people who are utterly incompetent feel like everything is simple and they know everything.
They go to DC. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
They go.
So I mean, I think that you feel like you don't know it all is a good signal that you have and are gaining confidence, because that feeling of not knowing it all, that feeling of that fear of failure, that grit, that drives you to continue to be better, to continue to learn, and to continue to raise your level of performance. That's absolutely critical. So.
Well said. And, be a revolutionary. I love that theme. That was part of this conversation here today. We'd love to, I bet you've got plenty of stories of your parents coming here and immigrating from Nicaragua. What that's part of the American story, right?
It is.
His parents come here, and then he found, has a journey he described here, and is creating so many opportunity for other companies and other people. I mean, I love that. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So, but we're going to call it a show here at this point. Big thanks again, Alex Ramirez with CognitOps. Big thanks to Greg White for joining me here today. Excellent conversation, Alex. Hey, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are across the globe. On behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton signing off for now, though, Greg. We'll be back tomorrow. Hey, most importantly, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.